Welcome to Civilian Carry Radio, proud member of the Firearms Radio Network. This show is brought to you by our sponsors tonight, Big Tex Outdoors, FPF Training, and Ammo.com. Big Tex Outdoors' main focus is high-quality tactical EDC gear. They offer 100% risk-free shopping. That means if you change your mind for any reason, they will refund the full purchase price, shipping costs, and pay for the return shipping. So total risk-free shopping. On top of that, most of their orders ship in 24 hours or less. Some of their items ship for as little as $1.99. They're an FFL Class 3 OSOT, so they sell suppressors, SBR, and other NFA items. Check out their website, bigtexoutdoors.com, and please use the code CCRadio for a 15% discount at checkout. And remember, folks, risk-free shopping. FPF training is for citizens seeking to become capable self-defenders who require that their mindset be reinforced with knowledge to enable them to make informed decision-making skills necessary to undertake decisive action while under stress. To fulfill this requirement, our sponsor FPF Training offers concealed and carried advanced skills and tactics consisting of extensive coursework, practical application, and range time. This focuses on a host of skills designed to enable ordinary people to prepare for themselves for the armed lifestyle and criminal violence. FPF Training is based in Culpeper, Virginia, is traveling selected ranges around the country. To attend this course or host a class, visit fpftraining.com. And then, folks, please stay tuned at the end of this live YouTube broadcast for a video feature from our sponsor, FPF Training, entitled FPF Training's Concealed and Carry Advanced Skills and Tactics. Ammo.com is offering you, our listeners and viewers, a $20 discount off of any order over $200 or more. On top of that, they donate 1% of every sale to pro-freedom organizations such as Helms for the Troops, United Service Organizations, aka USO, all at no extra cost to you, the customer. They take on that 1% expense, not you. Head over to ammo.com/CCR. Again, ammo.com/CCR. Thank you. Folks, our goal and focus of this podcast is to spread the message to everyday people on the importance of the Second Amendment, firearms, safety, education, training, and mindset. Remember, you and only you are responsible for the safety of yourself and your protection of yourself and your loved ones. Our mission statement, gun ownership is your right, safety and education are your responsibility. I'm your host, Baraka James, along with my co-host, Alan Sams. Good evening, Alan. How are you?
Great, Baraka. How's it going?
Doing well, man. Happy to be here. Blessed. And our first guest co-host this evening is Mr. Dale Bolke of Hardwire Tactical Solution and DB Shooting Adventures. Good evening, Daryl. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Our second guest co-host tonight is Mr. Lee Weems, LEO, Chief Deputy and owner of First Person Safety. Good evening, Lee. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm hoping that the show is half as good as the pre-show conversation that we had tonight.
I know the pre-shows are always good. All right, folks, we are listener-funded radio, and you, the listeners and viewers, make this program possible. You can contribute to the show via Patreon for as little as $1 per episode, which comes out to like $4 a month, or as much as you'd like by going to patreon.com, do a search for CC Radio, or by clicking the link here in our show notes. A huge shout-out to our $10 per show Patreon pledges, Robar Companies Incorporated, Mark B., our $5 per show Patreon pledges, Christopher D., Rob J., CJ, James W., Russ A., Ira S., Rob C., Michael G., Eric B., and Mark A. We thank you so much for your continuing support. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employees. Viewer discretion is advised, especially on live shows. Tonight, folks, we have a esteemed guest who is returning to us for the second time in our 2-year history here, and we're very honored and proud to have him back on the show, and that is Mr. Dave Spaulding, LEO, 36 years experience of law enforcement and federal, and owner of Handgun Combatives. Good evening, Dave. How are you, sir?
I am well, thank you.
Thank you for coming back on, folks. And I am going to read
with Lee and Daryl here. I think you've got everything covered that I could possibly add.
Except you trump them on experience, Dave. You've got the overall experience, and that's why you are here, my man. And thank you so much. All right, folks, let me give you Dave's quick bio here. Dave Spaulding is a professional firearms instructor with 36 years experience in law enforcement and federal security, the recipient of the 2010 Law Enforcement Trainer of the Year Award from the International Law Enforcement Training and Educational Association, ILETA. Dave has graduated from many of the most prestigious LE and firearms training programs and has trained students from across the globe in realistic combat handgun techniques. He worked in all facets of law enforcement, including communications, corrections, court security, patrol, evidence collection, training, and investigations. He was a founding member of his agency SWAT team and acted as a training officer for 8 years. He spent a year in an undercover capacity and was commander of a multi-jurisdictional narcotics task force and literally worked cases from Miami to Seattle. He has been an adjunct instructor at former Heckler and Koch International Training Division and Tactical Institute. In addition to his many published articles, over 1,400 to date, Dave is author of 2 acclaimed books, Defensive Living, Handgun Combatives. He is also featured in a series of training videos by Paneo Productions. He currently operates his own training company that focuses exclusively on combat application of handgun. And you can find that at handguncombatives.com. And in our show notes, we have Dave's website, his Facebook page, and his YouTube. Alan, take it away, brother.
Okay, Dave. We talked about this in the pre-show, and hopefully we can get all that we had talked about in on this. But my question that generated that was, how do you feel about the current state of firearms training? And is there anything that's not available that you think should be? And is anything being underutilized or overemphasized?
I am very encouraged about the current state of combative firearms training. And I clarify combative firearms training, the combative application of that firearm. Mm-hmm. I have nothing against competition. I think life is too short. If you want to compete, you should compete, have a good time. But there is a bit of a difference in the application of the gun in those two situations. But I'm very encouraged about what I'm seeing with the younger folks. I try very, very hard not to let the old man in. And what I'm talking about was an interview with Clint Eastwood when they, at 88 years of old, how is he still so involved in making movies and acting? And he says, I try not to let the old man in. And it's real easy to get all grumbly and crotchety and grouchy about what the younger guys are saying, but it's their time. It's their time to teach the classes. That being said, they're not teaching anything that we didn't teach in my generation, because there's only so many ways to shoot a gun. There's only so many ways to enter a room, only so many ways to draw a holster. So they're basically recycling the same stuff, but they're doing it in a way that is maybe a bit more flamboyant than I would do it. But at the same time, they're putting a whole new generation of shooter behind the gun in support of the Second Amendment, buying firearms. And if you look at it that way, that's a good thing. So I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing. Is there anything that's underutilized? I would say no. I would say we're overemphasizing some things. I think we're trying to beat some things in the ground, trying to make it look sexier and neater than it really should be, because it should be viewed in a more foundational level. So, because if you look at what skills are used to win a gunfight, it's those foundational skills. It's not the, flaming out of a repelling out of a flaming helicopter or doing a barrel roll or any of that kind of stuff. It's drawing from the holster. It's, working the trigger. It's those kind of things that win a close quarter pistol fight. And when I say close quarters, I'm talking about 25 yards and in. That's how I view close quarters. So, sorry if I got long-winded, but
no, that's what we want.
I'm very encouraged about where we are these days. I'm really encouraged about the next generation of instructor that's coming up.
How do I word this? How much, when we had talked about that, we kind of got on this, how much of your personal shooting style has changed over the years, and what was the catalyst for those changes?
I've probably had to change my shooting style like 3.5 times, and why 3.5? I'll explain it. I went through the basic police academy in 1976, and save yourself the math. I'm 64 years old. Okay. So, and we did a 40-hour block of firearms very early in the academy, and it was very task specific. Basically, it was all designed to pass the practical pistol course. And the practical pistol course is still in existence as a competition, but back then it was considered combat. And we did some really innovative things, like we laid prone at 60 yards. Now, why is that a big deal? We were shooting 38 special revolvers, 4-inch barrels, 148 grain hollow base wad cutters. They left the muzzle at 600 feet per second, which at 60 yards, that meant you had to lob them in like a mortar in order to get them to hit. So, what good is that in the gunfight? And then, a braced kneeling position at 50 yards. And then at 25, we did a barricade shoot, not use of cover, a barricade where you put your hands on the edge of the barricade and you put your hand in the crook of your thumb and 50% of your body was exposed. Well, that was the way people used cover. They got shot because of it. Our close quarter pistol craft was done at 15 feet. And what you basically did is you locked your arm in like this with your elbow tucked in with your gun basically underneath your eye. And you were supposed to keep your forearm parallel to the ground. Now, I don't know how you did that because I wasn't standing off to the side to look at myself. But you would do it here. And when you would change targets, you would basically jump. And you were supposed to hit stuff that way. Well, I left that block of instruction knowing that this was not gunfighting. Now, I don't know why, because the only thing I knew about gunfighting was 1960s television. And if you ever saw like an old episode of I Spy, you realize I was probably stunted with their gun handling being what it was. Mm-hmm. But I knew this wasn't it. So I stopped in to see my dad, who is a veteran of Iwo Jima. And he's sitting there and we're talking about the academy and he's asking me about it. And I said, Dad, we just went through this firearm section and it didn't make sense to me. And I made a statement that literally changed my life. I said, I wished I could talk to somebody who had been in a gunfight. He didn't even look away from the television set. He says, son, go down to the Legion Hall. There's lots of them. World War II had only been over about 30 years. Those guys were younger than I am now. Mm-hmm. So off I went to the Legion Hall. And they, I walked in the door and they busted my chops. I tried to explain what I wanted. They finally sent me at the end of the bar with a guy who was about 412 years old. And he was a veteran of the trench and tunnel warfare of World War I. And for the next hour and a half, he sat there with his hand shaking while he tried to sip his beer and just tears were coming out of his eyes. And he explained to me what it was like to go up and over the edge of the trench in the no man's land where massive submachine guns were shooting an angled fire. And then they would try to tunnel underneath the enemy lines to set off explosives. And he told me it was literally a daily event where they would take a scoop of dirt and there'd be a German soldier doing the same thing right there in front of you. Mm. And like, we talk about close quarter battle. Do it in a 4-foot hole with a shovel. That's where the brass knuckle dagger type, knife comes from. But I left that interview just like, wow, what I just did not prepare me anything like that. And so for the next almost 40 years, I just tried to talk to everybody I could who had ever been in a gunfight. Mm-hmm. World War I, World War II veterans, Korean War veterans. Talk to someone to Chosin Reservoir, where they had walls of Chinese soldiers coming at them. And they'll tell you that the M1 Garand maybe wasn't the best battle implement of all time because it shot 8 rounds and went bling when it was empty. They liked the M1 carbine, where they would put banana clips. That was their term. And they would tape them together. And those guys thought the M16 sounded pretty cool, but somebody in Vietnam that would watch the 5.56 glance off a twig, they didn't think so much. So over the years, there were literally hundreds of people that I interviewed, and it just blew me away. And then I was a cop in a very active area in Southwest Ohio where I retired from. The year I retired, the city that was the county seat was the 7th most violent city in the nation. Mm. So it was a great place to be a cop, and I was in an agency of about 500 people. So it was big enough to have a wide variety of assignments, but small enough you didn't get lost. And I had some of my own experiences. I know what it's like to have someone try to take my life. So I took all those interviews I did, and I took my personal experiences, and I took the training courses and the instructors that had talked to me and the things that I had learned, and I molded it all together into Handgun Combatives. And along the way, I had to literally unlearn and relearn basically 4 different methods of shooting. And you guys all realize that may just go over your listeners' head, but you guys realize that when you're truly trying to master and anchor a set of skills into automaticity so that you can do them without conscious thought, that's a long process. And it takes a lot of time, effort, ammunition, concentration, and that it was a learning process for me. And then along the way, because I had a minor degree in sports physiology and human performance, I understood how the human body worked. And a lot of the things that were status quo for the time, the latest cutting edge training, I knew to be BS. But you know what? I was just a cop from a Cal County in Ohio. I couldn't speak up. So all of this experience and the things that happened to me became what I now call, handgun combatives and the methodologies that I teach.
And Dave, before we get away from that, can you talk about what we talked about in the pre-show about the factory workers and the automaticity?
Oh yeah. A lot of stuff goes out there and it's misunderstood, but it takes mainstream, like the concept of muscle memory. I don't usually correct it because you say it, people know what you're talking about, but it's not correct because muscles do not have the capacity to think, thus they don't have memory. What we are talking about is a concept or what is known as familiar task transference. And it came from the motion studies of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where human beings were literally sitting on an assembly line doing the same motion in and out all day long. And one of the things that were highlighted in those motion studies were female employees who literally could stand there and do the same thing all day long and carry on a conversation and not even pay attention to what they were doing, but with a 98 point something success or precision level. Well, that's a level of automaticity that, we'll never get with these things because we can't put that amount of time, effort, and energy into it. But, it's not really muscle memory. It's familiar task transference. And you guys were talking about, psychomotor skills and stuff like that. And that is certainly a part of it. But what we're basically talking about is a level of motor function where you can perform it without having to actually think about it, where you actually, you eliminate the orientation phase of Boyd's loop and you go some observation to action. Boom. That's what we're trying to achieve, but it's a long process, especially when you have to learn and unlearn and relearn, certain skills.
Mm-hmm. Before we get too far from the subject we were on, I got a question in the chat. It is from Ryan McCann. He wanted to know, do you think there might be an overemphasis on blazing split times? If yes or no, why?
Yes. You can go too fast in a gunfight. We've known that for a long time. Wyatt Earp talked about it. You take your time in a hurry. And what he was talking about is you didn't want to go so fast that you could not comprehend what was going on. I'll give you a case example. Room clearing, what is commonly called CQB. We see so many teams go so fast through rooms that they miss people who were standing there. That's a dangerous circumstance. You can go too fast. You need to be able to process what's going on. When you're shooting a threat, when it stops being a threat, you have to stop shooting it. Mm-hmm. If your emphasis is on split times, then you're not giving your brain time to process what's going on so that you can pull back. Or when you're clearing a room, you're going so fast that you don't really take a look at what's going on around you. Or you see a particular threat and you focus only on that and never see what's going on around you. Again, this is not something that's new. The guys like Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson and Bill Tillman and those guys talked about going too quickly in conflict. You only want to go as fast as your muscles can allow you to do it in a controlled and sure method. It's great to have a quarter-second split, but if you really think about it, if you have a 33 split, that's 3 rounds per second. Mm-hmm. How fast do you need to go?
I think, I just wrote a big thing on we always want to talk about a balance of speed and accuracy and acceptable target and all that. You know, human beings, acceptable target size of a grapefruit. That's it. Chest and head, grapefruit. You're shooting grapefruits. That's your acceptable target.
It's not very big.
And then what I added is I go, nobody ever wants to talk about assessment. It's a balance of speed, accuracy, and assessment. And assessment, if we talk about what is probably getting lost these days, is assessment abilities. And the assessment in combative shooting inside the United States is what gets you in trouble. It's really the win or the loss right there is how good speed accuracy is great, but you know, if you assess them properly, you've got a lot of issues, you know. And what we see, particularly people who, you know, talking about neuro pathways, when all you ever do is train at at a speed faster than reaction time, at what point are you becoming an automatistic, you know, the rate that you can't stop?
Well, you don't want to become an automaton. Automaton is the skill set, but an automaton is the person. You need to be a thinking, processing individual. And if you're going so fast that you can no longer make decisions or take note of what's going on, then you're going too fast. And I have a little theory about this, and I have no basis on this. I have done no scientific study. It's just me observing it over the years. But what I think happens is that people will relate what they know and what they experienced to something that they don't. Mm-hmm. Pardon me, it's allergy season. So someone who has never actually been in armed conflict, have never actually been in a critical decision-making situation, will relate what they know, and that may be competition. So they think, well, if I've got real fast splits and I got a real fast draw and I got a real fast reload, I'll be ready for a gunfight. Well, those are great manipulation skills, but they don't do a darn thing for crisis decision-making. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, the secret to winning a gunfight is not how fast you can shoot or how quick you can swing a sword or how hard you can throw a punch or any kind of a fight. The person that wins the fight is the one that sees the situation for what it truly is first. And then they adapt accordingly and apply the necessary skills that will end this situation. Now, it's a long sentence, but it's still easier to say than do. Mm-hmm. And if you have no comprehension of no true understanding for what a fight really is, it's not unusual to apply what you do know to it. And I think that's what people do. And also, instructors are partly responsible for this because you know what? I can get your splits faster. I can increase the speed of your draw. I can make your reload better. And as a student, you leave there thinking, look how awesome I am. That instructor's terrific. I got to thank him. But did he really prepare you for the fight?
Yeah, this sort of, I got the next question, so I'm going to double this because I'm going to have two, because one leads into the other. So, or one lead is from what you just talked about. So I recently posted on some internet stuff about knowledge and true knowledge. And, you know, some of us are getting up there into a bunch of snow faces and old guys that get discounted a lot. But, you know, there's a guy named Charles Pierce who lived from 1839 to 1914 and studied ideas, you know. And what he concluded that true knowledge of anything depends on testing one's ideas and actual experience, because in and of themselves, ideas are little more than a hypothesis until tried upon the anvil of experience. And being Dave just brought this up, and this is one of the things I've learned to live by, you know, from the time I started as a young cop, and very similar to Dave, have changed a lot of stuff over the years based on experience hitting on that. When the experience starts catching up with my hypotheses on what worked and what didn't, do you think we're how much of your experience, what do you think is the most applicable, and how, or if you could kind of explain what those experiences or some of that has changed that you sort of touched on, of that you've changed 3 or 4 times of what you're doing, and you sort of touched a little, but where you are today with that?
Well, I mean, the things I was talking about is, in the mid 1970s, we started out point shooting. And then we went away from point shooting to very strong modern technique of the pistol, where we were really twisted off to the side and pushing and pulling. And then it was the really locked out John Shaw surgical speed shooting. And now we realize, because we understand motor performance a little bit better, that our arms are a little bit more relaxed. The elbows are kind of bent. We know how to grip the pistol a little bit better. But every time you had one of those techniques, you had to unlearn it, because there's a big difference between point shooting and modern technique of the pistol. And the modern technique of the pistol versus, the IPSC type competition type shooting that we were doing going down the Mid-South and things like that was really different than the modern technique of the pistol. And then the now more relaxed, physiologically efficient methods that we're doing now required us to change it a little bit. But going from this to this is why I say I had 3.5 changes, because the change wasn't as dramatic. But, every time you do that stuff, Daryl, you're not focusing on other things that you could be focusing on. And that takes you away from other preparation, because we all realize that to truly be prepared, to truly have a well-rounded program of personal security, it's more than just having one of these and being able to shoot tight groups. It's having a level of awareness to see the threat coming. It's having some open hand skills, depending on what your job position is. Maybe you've got impact weapons, or you've got pepper spray. There's a whole lot of levels to that preparation that need to be maintained and readdressed regularly, that when we're trying to unlearn and relearn something takes away from all that stuff. And let's face it, we have lives to live. We're husbands, we're wives, we're boyfriends, we're girlfriends, we're aunts, uncles, we're parents, we're grandparents, we're volunteer soccer coaches, we're employees, all of those things that make life worth living. That how much time can we dedicate to things like this? So, we got to take all that into account. We may want to be, training all the time, but life doesn't let us do that unless you're a member of some full-time high-speed unit and you train for a living. So
that led right into my next question. So you talked, they brought up the initial question was sort of about, trainers, today's trainers and people coming up, and at what point, I get a little frustrated almost on the, and I don't want to say I'm frustrated with the students, because the students are what we're here for, all of us, and we're all students. But, it's foundational skills. I think we're all on the same page that it's all about foundational basics. It's execution of the basics in a crisis. Yet it seems to be that, nobody wants to do the basics, and most of us are teaching the basics fairly close. A lot of us at a certain place are fairly similar, and maybe some of us can explain things better, different, more adapted to certain students or whatever. But do you see a trend in the industry, or a trend out there, that maybe some of these people are getting so far away the basics because, there's some idea that you can get rich being a firearms trainer? That, and equally on the students' parts, is they don't want to spend money for the basics, because I can go learn advanced stuff somewhere. There's this other guy and he's teaching advanced.
Bruce Lee in 1968 made one of the best statements ever. It was, advanced skills are the basics mastered. And we're talking about mastered to a level of automaticity. A couple of years back, I was invited to come to one of the big state SWAT association conferences. And I tended to I didn't didn't want to do those. I didn't want to get into the SWAT stuff. I wanted to stay with, pistol craft and all that. But they kept asking. So I finally acquiesced, and I went up and I did a one-day class. And it was kind of a mixture of foundational skills with kinetic aspects, with movement. And we did lateral movement. And Lee, you took this class here just a few months ago. But we did lateral movement, stopping and starting and, forward and rearward and all that kind of stuff. And then in the end, we shot my foundational skills test, which is those foundational things like a round from ready position, a round from the holster, one shot, reload, one shot, 4 rounds on target and all those, those foundational skills. And these big SWAT guys with all this advanced training couldn't pass them. Well, do you know what my course reviews read? What he taught us is not relevant to our mission. They couldn't pass my course standards, my foundational skills, but it's not relevant to their mission. The fact of the matter is when you do all of the in and out and moving through the doors and down the hallways and all the choreography, at the end of it, you've got to put the gun on target. You've got to depress the trigger, and you've got to hit the guy well enough to stop him. And moving into position, planting and shooting accurately is probably one of the most foundational of foundational skills. And if you can't do that, then all this advanced stuff doesn't make any sense. Let me throw a little quiz at you guys, and I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. But what is the single most important skill in a gunfight?
Surviving the gunfight?
Decision making or
surviving just ain't a
you guys are going to, when I say this, it's
recognizing that you're in a gunfight.
Getting the gun between you and them.
Yeah.
Until you do that, all the rest of the Zywash, right?
Right.
Put the gun between you and them, and whatever configuration that is. So getting the gun out of the holster or from the ready position, that's about foundational on top of foundational. But little heed is given to such a important foundational skill because we're going to do all the sexy stuff. But until you get the gun between you and them, all the rest of this is just nothing.
Yeah,
we lose the mission in all of the window dressing.
Yeah, I sort of blessed in 1989. I took over training our SWAT team as a 24-year-old, basically rookie policeman, because I could shoot real well, but had no idea what I was doing. Went out to LAPD D platoon, and I was blessed to have Larry Mudgett take me under his wing. And one of the things is that changed everything we did, changed kind of my life and how we did stuff, was shooting their qual course. So I got the job because I was the best shooter in the department, and I couldn't pass LAPD SWAT's qual, which is fairly basic stuff. And I remember telling Larry, I go, the thing is with my SWAT guys is they want something different every time they go to the range. They want to do all this different stuff, and we can't just do the same qual course every time. And Larry says, yeah, you can. He goes, you want to make this more difficult? Shoot the qual course in gear. Shoot it in gas mask. Shoot it with a flashlight at night. Shoot it support hand only, because you can make this as hard as you want, but you just leave the core fundamentals of the course exactly the same, and you just change the difficulty that it's executed under. And, that was sort of, like I said, I was pretty blessed to be getting that stuff when I was 24, 30 years ago, as opposed to, having to really earn that.
John Helms and Larry Mudgett are two legendary gunfighters that most people haven't heard of.
Right. Well, I was blessed to have both of them at 24, and I'll make you jealous. I have all of John Helms's SIS guns.
I'm jealous. What's even more disgusting is that you were 24 in 1989. Okay.
Well,
I was still in high school in 1989.
I was 35.
Me too.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's. I want to say this in such a way that I don't turn off your listeners and viewers, but you cannot progress on until the foundational skills are taken care of.
Yep.
You know, one of the things about in-service, I used to always do it when I was doing in-service. And you know what? I wish some of these big name firearms instructors would do a year of police in-service. That would humble them. Instead of having everybody that worships what they say, they would ask people that were standing there like this looking at them. Because one of the things I'd always do, and I would get my people 3 times a year, which was unusual. But I would always do foundational stuff, like I would draw from the holster, or I would shoot from the ready, or we would just do a simple reload or a stoppage clearance. And people would say, we did this the last time. And I would say, yeah, but you still suck at it. Quit sucking at it, now quit doing it. Because until you quit sucking at it, we can't progress on, right? You've got to be good at the foundation before you can move on to the combative aspects. So, you know, buckle up and let's do this right. But God, it's like building your house on a foundation of styrofoam. Until you make that foundation, those foundational skills concrete, you can't go on to build the rest of the pyramid. That is the combative and interactive skills that will make you a better gunfighter.
Lee?
Dave, you and I had a discussion about a year and a half ago, and I was kind of talking about how there's the new wave of instructors who have become celebrity instructors because they have, you know, Instagram accounts and YouTube pages, and they haven't really paid the dues of learning all this knowledge. Like they haven't gone through having to relearn how to shoot 4 different times.
You really want to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They haven't had they don't have the contextual, you know, background
Well, you know,
to have gone through this evolution. I think all this stuff is new, like the appendix thing from the last 3 or 4 years. Oh, this is all new. Well, it's not. We had that great story that you told in the pre-show that I want to get to in just a second. But, you know, you mentioned, you know, you started out point shooting and then you went to the hard weaver. If you go back to look at Jeff Cooper's writings, in 1960, he wrote a book and it was all about point shooting. And then the very next year, he had a book come out. It was like, hey guys, there's this thing called a front sight on a pistol. And if you use it, it'll actually.
Behind me has those books in it. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He did.
You know, and it's just kind of touch on like the evolution and the history of all this that we've come through. And you got to tell the Luke short story.
And while you're answering that, I have a question too that I've wanted to ask like 4 times. It plays right off that. If while you were learning the point shooting and all the rest, that was at that time you guys thought that was right. Why are we right now? That's what everybody always says. There's nothing new under the sun. Blah blah blah. Why is that so?
We better understand human physiology now. That we didn't. You know, this book right here is a college textbook written by Dr. Richard Schmidt. And I think there's like 7 editions of it. A book like this was my textbook when I had sports physiology in college in the 1970s. But, you know, we ignored how the human body performs. I mean, just take a look at how your arm folds up and how it extends and how it goes back. You know, we didn't take into account how the human body truly functions. And now we have paid more attention to that. And that has come from the study of track and field, gymnastics, baseball. You know, those sports really take great effort to look and see how human beings move and function and do things so that they can better perform in their sport. And we have taken that same track now with combat shooting. How does the body best work? And I think that's where we are right now is because we truly understand that. Lee, your question about the celebrity instructor. If we're talking about combative firearms training, and I'm going to irritate a lot of those NRA instructors out there, and guys, those of you who are out there watching that are at that level, thank you very much, because it's the NRA or the CCW instructor that does a lot of work for guys like me, because they take this object and they show people how to put the bullets properly in a magazine and how to grab a hold of it and all that. They do those really foundational skills. So you guys are very, very important. Understand that. What I'm talking about is the guy that says he's the gunfight instructor. I'm teaching you the combative application. I'm teaching gunfighting. And then you look into their background and it's an empty suit. It's as hollow as a paper towel roll. There's no substance. There's nothing there. The only thing they have is a pretty flashy online appearance. You know, the guy does some pretty wild and crazy stuff online and gets a lot of attention and now is suddenly teaching classes. Let me ask you something, folks. Is that the person you want to teach you to save your life or the life of those you care about? That's a pretty important decision. You probably ought to look into the background of the person that's teaching you those skills. And an internet gun celebrity is not the person to do that. If they're just going to teach you how to shoot, great. But there's a difference between shooting and fighting. And Lee, you and I and Daryl, we teach fighting. We teach skills that are applicable to using this stuff in interpersonal conflict, not just punching holes in paper. Big difference there. What is it? What else did you ask me?
Oh, just, we were talking about the history and the context of how all the skills have evolved. In the pre-show, we were talking about how appendix carry is looked at as new, but you got those pictures. Somebody posted a picture on Facebook this morning of Jim Cirillo carrying a 1911 and appendix. Then you told a great story about Luke Short.
Well, about 1989 or 1990, I went to a class taught by Bruce Nelson at one of the IALITA regionals, and it was called Carrying Forward of the Hip. And basically what he was talking about was appendix carry. Now, most of the time these days, folks are carrying more abdominal. But what appendix was to the side of your abdomen, just forward of your hip. And I took that training back then, and he made a lot of good points. But even before that, we're talking about the days of the Old West. These days, most of the folks want to look at the special operators. And listen, I'm not opposed to that. These guys certainly deserve a lot of respect and a lot of credit. But, when I started looking into all this kind of stuff, the special operations community was just like nobody paid any attention to it. I mean, let's face it, with the exception maybe Black Hawk Down, nobody paid any attention to the special operations community until after 9/11. So prior to that, I tended to look at the Old West gunfighters, and probably because I grew up in the 50s and 60s where everything was Westerns. But I looked into the guys like, Luke Short and Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp and Virgil Earp and Bill Tillman and Charlie Bassett and these kind of guys who basically carried handguns for their personal security. And they lived a life of threat because of the lifestyle they chose to live. And the interesting thing about it was there was a lot of misconceptions about the Old West. Like, for example, the cowboy holster that we all see now, that's the Buscadero rig. That didn't come around to the 1950s. Those guys didn't wear those holsters out on the range. As a matter of fact, when they were in town, they didn't really wear holsters. Many of the towns, Dodge City, Tombstone, Virginia City, you couldn't wear guns in town. You had to surrender those. And the people that did carry guns carried them concealed. Well, there was no concealment holsters. They put them down the front of their pants or a cross draw into their pants, and they put a coat over top of it. Wyatt Earp, just several days before the gunfight in the vacant lot behind the OK Corral, several blocks over or something like that, he took delivery of a long black coat, what we would call a duster, that the pocket was lined with canvas because he carried his gun in his coat pocket and he wanted to be able to draw it out and use it. So the idea of carrying down the front of your pants in what we now call appendix was very, very common. Luke Short was very, very famous for that. First of all, he was short, but his name really was Short. He was only like 5'6". But he carried his Colt Peacemaker down the front of his pants and he would open the loading gate so it wouldn't slide down the front of his pants. Okay? And when he would draw it, he would like flip it closed if he needed it. But he was actually in a gunfight in front of the Oriental Saloon in Tombstone, and I wished I could remember the fellow who was in that gunfight with him. I apologize. But it was at like single arm's length, and they both went for guns. And the only reason that Luke Short prevailed in that gunfight was because the fella he was fighting caught the hammer spur of his gun on his watch chain when trying to draw it from appendix carry, and he couldn't get it into the fight. Luke Short shot him so close that he caught his clothes on fire. That's how close that was. But those modes of carry are by no means new. They have been around forever. And I have no problem with appendix carry. I'm not a big fan of the abdominal carry up front, but the side kind of appendix to the side of your abdomen, I think there's a lot to be said for that, but it's hardly new. And I'll be quite frank with you guys. I see a lot of people doing it and they don't do it well. Not really well at all. So, Lee, I just went on. Did I hit all your points, man? I'm sorry if I didn't.
Oh yeah. That's really what I was wanting to get to, is the historical background of all this. That gets just so lost in the digital age. In history class in college, they said, you go to the primary source, not the book that was written based on an interview, based on some guy who read a book about the actual event. You go to the primary source and read the actual events. And that's one of the things that I think we're losing in the modern age, is we don't have the context of what went on 4 decades ago.
Well, you got so many people spouting off on the internet because they went to the University of Google, and they're just recycling information they heard someplace else. Very few people go to where the source occurred, where this stuff is from. And I think you and I were talking when we were down in Swansea, North Carolina here not too long ago. You and I were standing there on the range talking about the same things that probably Wyatt and Virgil Earp and Doc Holliday were talking about sitting on the front porch in Tombstone. They thought about these same things. They thought about trying to save their own lives. They thought about how to enhance their gear, how to make it more user-friendly. I know for a fact that Bat Masterson had a conversation with, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, but the bell-shaped grip versus the bird's head grip on the revolver and how well it allowed them to point the gun. They thought about that kind of stuff. That's why there was a bell-shaped grip and a bird's head grip. That stuff just wasn't arbitrary. It was done because things happened that made the gun companies think about that stuff. Go online and look up the letter that Bat Masterson wrote to the Colt Firearms Company when he ordered his 2 nickel-plated peacemakers. Kind of interesting in how he wanted taller and wider fronted sights, and he wanted a better action on his gun, and all the kind of things that we all talk about today.
I think what gets lost is, when I brought up that anvil of experience, likes, followers, and how many times you can Google and research stuff is not, to us, an anvil of experience. Sadly, we have a whole generation coming up where it is. And video games is like an experience, that you think you can, hypothesize your way out of everything because, you can get on the internet and somebody already did it. And you just look at it. I kind of poke fun at, a lot of the low light stuff. And I'm sitting there going, you got people teaching low light. Scariest thing they ever did is come home and mom forgot to leave the porch light on. I worked 19 years of nights on weekends, and I might have had some. Every shooting I've been in has been in a low light.
Have we made that complicated or what? In the
it's because you sit there and go, well, you talk about development of stuff, and I'll give you. I already knew because I was 10 years behind guys like you who had already figured this out. That point shooting didn't work. And I had a very similar
10, 12 feet anyway. Yeah.
Well, I show up at the academy and we get it, 7 yards or whatever, 3 yards. I draw my gun, come up to eye level, plaster the thing dead center. And the instructor said, you can't do that. It's cheating. And I look at him like, I think that's the whole, you mean because mine's dead center and everybody else's is somebody else. I kind of think that's a good thing. But, I had to learn to do it because you can't see your sights.
How many instructors? You said spread them out. You're shooting too tight of a group.
Right, yeah, faster than everybody else. But I found out my first week on the job about hard ISO because you know what you couldn't do, especially in 1988, in hard ISO. Doesn't work with a flashlight worth of crap. And when you spend the initial part of your career in the dark, my whole development of stance and ready positions and all that was all based about, I looked at two things. Can I shoot it in low light with a flashlight? Does it translate? And can I shoot it on a toilet? And I used the toilet thing is because I spent most of my time sitting in a car.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my office was about the size of a small bathroom, you know, so you had to kind of bang this stuff out. And that's sort of what seems to be lost today is it's like, is anybody thinking about this stuff on how it really applies? And that's sort of what's getting lost. And then the other thing you brought up that I want to mention is, you know, the other thing, because you have a book there that sends my blood pressure 4 stages to the wrong direction. And when we talk about all this sports physiology and athletics and stuff, the other problem is we got a lot of people out here who are applying stuff that doesn't apply. You know, or that we've taken freaks of nature or things and built, you know, the whole point shooting thing, Jelly Bryce. You know, if you relate that to Major League Baseball, Jelly Bryce could see bullets in flight. I don't know about you guys. I can't see bullets in flight. You know, Jelly Bryce was basically shooting, you know, with, you know, an incendiary, you know, a tracer round.
Right.
Years on a guy who could do stuff that not everybody else could. And
but he also practiced in front of a mirror an hour every day. Who does that?
Yeah, Scotty Reed said those guys didn't have TV back then. They actually, you know, Bill Jordan of the world didn't have television to sit in front of.
There's nothing instinctual about practicing in front of the mirror an hour every day.
Yeah, so you ended up with some of this weird stuff getting applied. You know, the whole thing with the Weaver stance. Oh, the Weaver stance changed everything. No, all Jack Weaver did, what he really changed was putting a front sight in front of his eye.
Well, have you ever seen pictures of Jack Weaver in his stance? It's the most kind of twisted up and contort. It worked for him, but it wasn't something I'd want to give to other people.
Yeah, well, you know what it is? He had a shoulder injury, and that's why I started carrying appendix. Is I got a shoulder injury my first, you know, within a few. Well, I was, you know, on probation, and back then, and you probably remember this, Dave. If you got hurt in training, they fire you.
Yep.
You weren't getting fixed. You weren't getting, you know, rehabbed. You got fired if you got hurt. So I just sucked it up, but I could never draw from anything behind my hip. And then I was carrying a 3-inch Model 13 appendix off duty, and then I just put my duty belt on over it, and it was sitting behind my speed loaders.
Well, you know, in the 1970s, we'd all go off duty. We'd, you know, take off our duty rigs and hang them in the locker. We'd get out our little cheap special and those little suede clip-on Bianchi holsters.
I was past that.
Everybody would put them down the front of their pants, get in the car and go home. That was, you know, that was the norm. There's nothing new. There's only so many ways to shoot a gun. They've all been invented. There's no Delta Recon Seal advanced method. It's all the same stuff. You know, it really comes down to is you got to grab the pistol in its optimal method. You got to get it between you and him. You got to depress the trigger in such a way you don't take the muzzle off target. All of those things will always apply, and there's no way you can change that. That's the root of all of this stuff.
And Dave, going back to the root, can you please tell our listeners and our viewers the excellent story you shared with us of how you actually went out and got real information about gunfighting? Because that blew me away.
Oh, you mean the interviews?
Yes, sir.
Didn't I talk about that?
No, not. No,
we were. That was pre-show.
Yeah,
well, that was in the pre-show.
Yeah. So if you could tell us the story about what you went to your dad, and
yeah, I mean,
that's just fascinating.
In 1976, I went through the Basic Police Academy, and the 40-hour block of firearms was very task specific. It was to get you to pass the practical pistol course, which the PPC is still a competition, I think, that's held annually, but there was no gunfighting about it. It was basically a competition course. And you did a lot of really pertinent things in it. Now, when I say these things, keep in mind we were shooting a 4-inch barrel, 38 special revolver with 148 grain hollow base wad cutters. They left the muzzle at 600 feet per second. So when you're laying prone at 60 yards, do you think you've got point of aim, point of impact? No, you had to lob them in like a mortar. At 50 yards, we would do a brace kneeling. At 25, you would do a barricade shoot, not use of cover, barricade. You put your hand on the barricade like this and lay your hand in like that, and 50% of your body was exposed. Well, you know, guys did that in the street, got shot because we weren't teaching them how to stand behind the cover. Close quarter pistol crack was done at 15 feet. And what you would do is you would tuck your elbow in, keeping your forearm kind of right up against your torso. And you were supposed to keep your forearm parallel to the ground. Now, I wasn't standing off to the side of it, so I really wasn't sure how you did that. But that was how you shot. And when you would change targets, you would jump like this, and you were supposed to hit stuff that way. You got to keep in mind, though, the target of the time, that if you hit the guy in the hand, you got points. So it was all points based. But I left that block of instruction knowing that I wasn't ready for a gunfight. I don't know. I knew nothing about it. You know, 1960s television, which was awful as far as gun handling, but I knew nothing. I stopped in to see my father, who was a veteran of Iwo Jima. I didn't actually learn until he was in his 80s, actually what transpired. But, you know, I'm surprised he functioned like he did, because like 80% of his unit were killed. He shouldn't have been alive. But I'm sitting there talking to him, and he's asking me how the academy's going. And I said, well, we just had this block on gunfighting, and it didn't make any sense to me. And I made a statement that changed my life. I said, I'd like to talk to somebody that has been in a gunfight. My father didn't even look away from the television set. He says, son, go down to the Legion Hall. There's lots of them. World War II had only been over 30 years. Those guys were younger than I am now. So off I went to the Legion Hall. And, of course, when I went in and tried to explain to the guy what I wanted, they busted my chops, called me cop kid and everything. They finally sat me on the end of the bar with a guy that looked to be about 400 years old. And he was a veteran of the trench and tunnel warfare of World War I. And for the next hour and a half, his hand was shaking as he tried to sip his beer, and tears were pouring out of his eyes. And he told me what it was like to go up and over the edge of the trench into no man's land, where you had Maxim machine guns firing at angles and just mowing everything down. And then when they realized that that did not work, they tried to start tunneling underneath the lines of the enemy, you know, just trenching along so they could set off explosives. And he said literally daily, they would take a scoop of dirt and there would be a German soldier doing the same thing. And the fight would be on. We talk about close quarter battle, you know, do it in a 4-foot hole with a shovel. You know, that's where the brass knuckle knives and daggers came from, was that type of warfare. I left that interview just stunned, knowing that what I had learned in the firearms portion of my basic academy did nothing to prepare me. Nothing. So it started me on a almost 40-year endeavor where I just talked to every person I could who had been in a gunfight. World War I, World War II veterans, Korean War veterans, Vietnam veterans. I got to talk to a couple of the Rangers from the Black Hawk Down, the Battle of Mogadishu. Lots of cops over the years, and armed citizens, more and more of them since I've been doing this, but also felons. Because felons have thoughts on gunfighting, and they don't think like we do. They think totally different. I got news for a lot of your viewers out there. When you turn the gun like this and shoot it, it does control recoil, and they shoot very well with it. You know, we all laugh, oh, look at that dumb gangbanger. That guy's been in 3 or 4 gunfights, probably killed several people. How many have you killed? So you want to kind of hold your tongue when you're going to the University of Google to research your gunfighting. But anyway, those hundreds of people that I've done, that I've interviewed over the decades, have led me to a place where I'm at right now. And of course, my own experiences, because, you know, I was a cop for 3+ decades in a very violent city. You know, we had a lot of activity, and I was in an agency of about 500 people. So it was big enough that you had a lot of different assignments, but not so big you got lost. So I had my own experiences, and I know what it's like to have someone try to take your life. So those interviews, my personal experiences, my training, the instructors I've dealt with and all that has come together to mold how I think about all of this stuff. So when I see a lot of this hocus pocus and eyewash on the internet, people talking about stuff they don't know what they're talking about, I just dismiss it, because I don't have all of the answers, but at least I have some. and I have some experience, which many of the celebrity instructors out there have none. And all of that stuff that I've just explained to you has gone into what I call Handgun Combatives. And Handgun Combatives is more than just the name of my company. It's the title of my book and my videos. But it's the combative application of the pistol. Combative is defined as to be ready and willing to fight. And that's what I want to do in my training company. I want to make you ready and willing to fight with a handgun. Because it's not the best tool. It's not the best weapon to have, but it is the most portable. It is the most convenient. It is the most concealable. And it's probably the one we're likely to have when the unexpected fight breaks out. If you know you're going to a fight and you take a pistol, you're not very smart. You know, take a freaking hand grenade or something, you know? Yeah, I mean, or don't go, call in sick. So did I hit on that, guys?
Yeah.
Knocked it out of the park. Thank you.
Yes. So, of those, I don't know if you call them myths or faults in training that you've experienced over the years that caused you to, change your shooting style. What's the biggest? And when I mean biggest, maybe the one that you think has the most impact on what we're doing today and has got us closer to perfecting that handgun combatives.
I'm not sure there's any one particular thing. I think it's more of a thought process. I think we oftentimes teach techniques, and as you guys know, a technique can also be a tactic, and a tactic can also be a technique. So, but we're talking about maybe manipulations of the pistol. And we do things oftentimes because it's convenient standing on the square range. And we as instructors get so entrenched in how we do it that we're afraid to change because it'll make us look bad. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've always highly respected about Ken Hackathorn was that he was never afraid to change. Every time I would talk to that guy, he was doing something a little bit new because he felt like something was better than what he was doing. And you know what? We've all taught things that we didn't know it, but they were wrong. And we were glad we knew they were wrong because we changed. But we do things that are not right fight-wise that may be fine for shooting, but not for fighting. For an example, weapon manipulations. The way I view this, and I'm going to use a little aid here, guys. Keep the slide open. The way I view it is when you're fighting with a pistol, the gun should stay between you and the threat. It needs to stay here. Whether you're reloading it, whether you're doing a manipulation, you're in a ready position, you're drawn from the holster. We fight in basically a combat corridor. View it as like the lanes on a running track between you and your threat. That's where the fight happens. Yeah, you may be standing like this, but you're going to deliver the bullet that way. You're going to stab the sword that way. You're going to throw the punch that way. It's a very linear situation. So the way I see it, that whenever we're doing manipulations, tactics, and techniques with the combative pistol, we want to do as much as we can to keep the gun between us and the threat. We get all wrapped around the axle of, where should the muzzle be pointed when you're reloading it? Should it be at the backstop or should it be? Well, you know what? If you're loading it right here, it's not between you and the threat. You should be loading it like right here so that you can keep it between you and the threat. So I think it's not that we're doing a specific thing badly. We're doing things without having a big picture view of what we're trying to do in the end. And that's keeping the gun between us and them as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Hey, Dave, let's turn this whole discussion around now. And this kind of follows up on a question Ryan McCann asked in the live chat. Okay, you get all this constant information thrown at you, and you just mentioned Ken Hackathorn, things come along, and he's always trying and changing and doing something new. As an instructor, and you learn new information, how do you weed out what needs to be new and added in versus stuff you need to chunk away? And for those new shooters coming up, how do they integrate new information that's coming to them?
Yep, disseminating.
Isn't that always the thing? Because, you know, we were talking earlier about Hick's Law. You know, Hick's Law is a thing. Does it apply to combative firearms training? Probably not. Because most people don't have enough options to get all that confused when going from 1 to 2 techniques and all that kind of stuff. But I think you probably can get too many tools in the toolbox, especially with the limited amount of time, ammunition, and all that kind of stuff that the typical person has to train and practice and prepare. So, Lee, I guess the way I look at that is that I always keep an open mind. You know, the whole idea that, you know, the mind, it's like a parachute. It works better when it's open. So I'm always open to new ideas. I'm always open to new techniques, new pieces of equipment, and all that kind of stuff. But the question I always ask myself is, how does this better prepare me for the fight? Does this truly make me better prepared? Does it enhance my ability? Does it make me a better combatant? Or is it just a thing? Because if it doesn't make me better prepared or better combatant or enhance my skills in some way, the time and effort and energy required to incorporate this into my skill sets is probably not going to be worth it. So I always think about, how does it make me better, if anything? I mean, I'll give you an example. The mini red dot sight on a pistol. That's the future. I mean, is it ready for prime time? I don't know. They're here. I'm not so sure that's important anymore. They're here. But the idea that now you're not really focusing on a front sight, you're focusing on the target and just superimposing something between you and them is huge. And you can hit better with it. What happens if it gets rained on or a chunk of mud hits it? Well, you know, that's a whole different thing, right? But it is something that has potential. So I'm looking at it. I'm just like a lot of the other guys. I'm looking at it. Am I ready to give up my irons yet? No, I can't say that I am. But you know what? I've given them up on my carbine. So are we going to be heading that way with a handgun? I think it's the future. But I'm always open to new ideas. And, you know, and that's why I like looking at some of the new instructors, like, you know, the mini red dot sight again. That's not something that came from my generation. I can't go to people in my generation and ask about that. I got to ask the younger guys. They're the ones that are working with that red dot sight. It came during their time in the scheme of things. So I look to the younger guys who are actually working with that stuff. So, you know, does it enhance me? Does it make me a better combatant? Does it improve me in some way? If it doesn't, then I'll tend to chuck it.
If I can piggyback on that, you know, you used one of those phrases that is another blood pressure spiker for me, which is, oh, it's another tool for the toolbox, you know. And I always look at, I use an analogy. You always got that friend or those people, you know, who've got a garage full, and this sort of falls into where I put Hick's Law and the combative stuff, is there's always the guy who's got the garage full of swap meet tools and can never find what they need because there's so much junk in the box, where I've always said I want to have that gleaming snap-on toolbox that's perfectly organized with all the right stuff in there. And I think I don't know if if people are putting enough effort into testing, training, and trying out tools before it earns a spot in the snap-on box. I'm sure Dave's been down this road, and so has Lee, is trying all sorts of different stuff that just never worked out. There's been some stuff that really looked good on paper, and then you try it and you're like, well, that was a piece of junk. We'll can that or put it in. But then the entire next portion of it is developing a training protocol around that piece of gear. I look at handgun grips as everybody's, well, that grip doesn't fit my hand or my gun. Well, you might need to change that a little because the guns aren't all the same, you know.
Well, let's put this in perspective. This is a tool.
Right.
This is a tool. The ability to use this tool is a skill. And I'm going to read you from the ultimate goal. This textbook right here, Motor Learning and Performance, Skill. Skill is the ability to bring about some end result with maximum certainty and minimum outlay of energy, time, and energy. That has nothing to do with a tool. That is what's required to use that tool well. So having another tool in the toolbox is having another holster in the box of discarded holsters. Those are tools. What we're talking about is skills. And then we're talking about skill sets. And one of the reasons that people fail in armed conflict is because they do not have the ability on a milliseconds notice to chunk together skills. They can perform a skill, draw from the holster, reload the gun, work the trigger. But what is required to win the gunfight is the chunking together of a bunch of those skills in one flowing motion. So they draw from the holster, they work the trigger, they move laterally, and if they have to tap racket, they can do all those in one flowing motion. They can put skill sets together, chunk skills together well. And most people cannot do that. And that is the reason that we don't want to overload our skill sets. Because in order to perform a skill at a level of automaticity and chunk those together in a flowing motion in a level of automaticity takes more time, effort, and energy than most people are willing to put into it. So it's not tools in the toolbox. You should pick the tools, and when they work for you, leave them alone. But you should always be working on the skills that will make that tool better and chunking those skills together. Because you know what? To win a gunfight, you don't know what skills you're going to have to adapt and apply. And as you're watching this thing unfold, you're going to have to grab this skill, that skill, that skill, put them together, perform it. And we're talking about very, very quickly. You can't think about that. You have to do it.
We also tend to see people who want to, if I just add this thing to my tool, the skill will come. If I put that trigger in there, then I don't have to learn how to properly press the trigger because I have a new super trigger, or I don't have to, I'll never have to worry about a reload because I've got this gigantic thing on the bottom of my gun that will reload it for me. And, you know, it's funny because I'm sure most of us can probably appreciate, I'll give you a John Helms. I've talked about this before. The beauty of talking to guys like John. John, what's important, in your guns? And I own most of his. So it's sights I can see, a trigger I can work, and it's reliable that it's going to work when I need it to. And, so yeah, did John's guns have a pretty decent trigger on them? Yes, they did. But you pressed them a lot to get them that way. And then you really need it in a trigger versus just buying one. Or
the only thing I would add to that is fit. Because, when we were back in those days, we were talking 1911s, they fit everybody. On my Glock, I have a grip reduction, so it's better.
Yeah, and absolutely. But, you probably didn't understand what you needed on fit until you really started shooting it.
If people would get some training and get some skill before they started picking all their gear, they would spend less money.
And I've gone through, and sort of the beauty, I'm a collector of weird old grips, Fuzzy Ferrance, Hurst,
Parrots.
Those guys knew something back in the revolver days, and now you don't have that. But, how many times have we played with, I'll give you an example, my HKs that'll do 27 different grip things. You sit there and play with side panels, back straps and stuff. Even though we've been doing this a long time, shot hundreds of thousands, absolutely, millions of rounds, we're still sitting there going, maybe I need to change this a little bit to get the grip right. But you have to go out to train to figure that out. And, it's all that I don't want to do the work. I just want to buy it and stick it on. And then magic will come. And it doesn't. And, I think most of us, that if nothing with all this gray getting in the beards, except for Baraka, who can't grow one, every time, Baraka, you're going to get a beard comment. You start to figure this out through our own mistakes and stuff. That you just got to go out and use this stuff and train.
Well, and maybe that's the big advantage of old guys. We've done this. We can tell you. I mean, yeah, everybody's got to learn it from themselves because, I can tell you, but if you learn it on your own, it has a more impactful lesson.
Right.
But you know what? These young folks coming up, there probably isn't anything they're going to experience in this journey of discovery we call training that we haven't already done, and we could help them. But
it's nice, and I'm sure Dave's gotten hundreds of these as well, and Lee. I remember Lee actually being pretty excited about this. There's nothing like that 3 a.m. phone call. You just saved my life. That stuff you taught us, or I had one guy, just training junkie. I remember him calling me. He goes, "Oh my God, I just got my first shooting." And you know what? You're right. Everything you told me was right. It wasn't at all like what I thought it was going to be. And everything you said was right on the money. And, there's something about, actually, again, doing this that you can try to extend to others, but until you kind of learn it yourself, man, it's tough. And, that a lot of stuff is different, in that first mano-a-mano gunfight or that first life-changing altering force situation. Man, and Dave's done a lot of what I did is I interviewed a lot of people to figure this stuff out. And the people I interviewed, spending times with Mudgett and Helms, Scotty Reeds, Pat Rogers, you learn a lot from those guys. And, there's a tendency now to discount a lot of that because, well, they don't have a YouTube channel that has whatever number of following likes or something. Like you said, Davian, most people have no clue who Helms and Mudgett are. And, they're out there, and the stuff's there if we pay attention to it. And you can certainly learn more from historical figures who've done it than the guy who's pontificating on the internet with no, basis to that whatsoever.
Yeah, the University of Google.
Yeah.
I can tell you can do all those fancy things to your gun, but they don't work when the extractor breaks, do they, Dave?
Nope.
No, they do not. They do not.
That's when we're going to figure out how knife combatives are.
I saw Dave's extractor break on
that was a brand new extractor. It had been in less than like 300 rounds. Gone.
Hey guys, I got to bail. I got to go to work because even at 54, I still am stuck with Graveyard because I like it.
Awesome. Thanks for coming out, Daryl.
Thank you so much, DB.
Guys.
Good seeing you, Daryl.
All right.
Have a good night. God bless you. Be safe, brother.
Dave, I got a question for you that on the face of it seems pretty simple, but I'm thinking that you'll probably have a little different take on it. Is what is a drill? What is a drill for? And how do you come up with the drill and with its intended effect?
Well, a lot of guys will come up with drills because they're good at it. It's something they look good when they do it. But, the way I look at it, a drill should reinforce essential skills. And, any particular drill should be helping you get better at not only a particular skill, but the ability to chunk those skills together. In Handgun Combatives classes, the drills that we do are all reinforcing skills that we've talked about in the class. Like the kinetic pistol class where we're doing movement, we have one called 15 to the third, where you draw, you shoot 5 rounds, you move laterally, you plant, you shoot 5 rounds, you move back, shoot 5 more. Well, what's the point of that? Well, it's teaching you to draw, deliver the gun to a relatively small target because you do this drill on a 3x5 card at 5 yards. So you're controlling the recoil, you're controlling the trigger, you're shooting a relatively small target, and then as soon as that last shot is fired, you're gone. Then you plant and get back on the target as fast as you can, and then as soon as you're done, you're going back in the other direction. So we're chunking or marrying together a bunch of essential skills. So drills should reinforce essential or necessary skills, the skills that you will need to chunk together to save your life. If they're not doing that, then what are they for?
Right. And again, skills are not tricks that you can do after you've tried it a couple times and do it once. Skills are something that you can do on demand when necessary.
right? But a good drill should be achievable to difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You should have to work at it. You know, my drills, I shoot my drills in my practice sessions all the time, and I'm not always successful. There's a lot of times I fail, but that just means that I need to work on them. I've neglected them. I need to work on them some more. You know, keep in mind that any training course you go to, you don't have real solutions, and you really don't get enough repetitions of any particular skill to truly master and anchor it. All you get is introduced to them with the understanding that you have enough comprehension and you understand it well enough that you can go back and practice it, master it, and anchor it. So a training course of 2, 3, 4 days is just an introduction to these. You have to decide whether they're essential to your personal protection, and then you got to go back and master them, anchor them. Drills are a confirmation that you're doing those skills pretty well.
Cool. Lee, you want to get that question in the chat?
Green Ops is asking us to talk about the skill levels that you expect to see in top-notch instructors.
Instructors?
Yeah, the skill levels that you want to see in a top-notch instructor.
I'm not sure I can give you particular skills. What I would say is I would expect the instructor to be able to perform every skill he teaches. He should be able to demonstrate it. If he's saying that you've got to have a 1-second draw, then he should be able to do that on demand right now. If he's calling for a 1.5-second draw, he should be able to do that. So everything he teaches, he should be able to perform, because we all realize with adult learning theory, you know, you explain it, you demonstrate it, practice it, and perform it, right? So that instructor should be able to demonstrate everything he teaches to the standard that he teaches. And people ask me all the time, when are you going to quit? When are you going to retire? And my answer is when I can no longer shoot my own standards.
Excellent. And he had a follow-up to that. What are your thoughts on hand-to-hand combatives and martial arts as they integrate with the firearms?
You know, I was not a martial artist. Like many people, I played around with different martial arts. I took Taekwondo for 5 years very early on before I realized it was a sport, not really a fighting skill. But, you know, I piddled around with it. But I think hand-to-hand combat skills are just as essential as firearm skills, because you're more likely to get in a hand-to-hand confrontation than you are a gunfight. And there's a real good chance that your gunfight may start out as a fist fight. And if you're pretty good at that fist fight, maybe the gunfight won't develop. So I think that's necessary. I've taken a lot of combatives type training over the years. What I really liked was the old World War II combatives, you know, the Fairbairn type stuff, the elbows, the knees, the heel palms, and all that kind of stuff. I thought that stuff was just exceptional. The last one of those classes I went to, I was like 58 or 59 years old. I went over and took Kelly McCann's 3-day sudden violence class, and I came back with a detached retina, a cracked rib, and a Charlie horse in my leg I could not get rid of. And I told myself, I'm done getting my butt kicked. You know, but I'm too old for that kind of stuff. I don't heal that well. But, you know, I've had that stuff. I know what it's like. I fought a guy in an elevator at the county jail. You want to talk about lack of skill? Fight somebody in an elevator. All of that stuff that looks so flashy in the gym and the dojo just does not work. It was only from the 4th floor to the 1st floor, so it felt about like 3 weeks. But, you know, it's the real simple basic skills. But you know what? You need to have some hand-to-hand skills. You've got to be not afraid to mix it up with somebody. And that comes with confidence and ability, because we've known since before the days of the Spartans that the single biggest factor in overcoming fear and conflict is having confidence that your skills will work.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
All right. This is where we got to get to start wrapping things up. Lee, what do you got going on, and where can people get a hold of you?
This weekend, I am presenting at the Range Master Instructor Reunion at KR Training, just outside of Austin, Texas. Then I'm back there in the last weekend in June, teaching a 1-day pistol, 1-day shotgun / lever gun class. June 1st, I'm up in Glasgow, Kentucky, teaching my combine dynamics of a deadly force legalities class with some pistol work. And then in October, I'm up there in your guys' neck of the woods teaching the debut of my 2-day traveling road show, Applied Pistol Craft.
Nice. Dave, how can people get a hold of you? And do you, I guess you probably don't even have any class openings, but
There's a few. There's still a few left out there. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready. There's a class in Oklahoma in September that was going to be a police-only program, and I talked the host into making it an open enrollment class. So we're going to be basically restructuring the class for a combative pistol, my 2-day combative pistol, my foundational in Oklahoma. But not this coming weekend. I got to go to a wedding, but the weekend after that, I'm doing a 1-day essential pistol class. And then I'm in Colorado. That one's sold out. Waynesville, Ohio. That one's sold out. I'm doing my week-long instructor certification, which has been sold out for months. I'm going to Nebraska. That's sold out. Kalamazoo, Michigan. That's sold out. That's just like that. I'm not doing anything more than every other week and this year. And next year, I'm going to do it about once a month. The thrill of hotel living and airfare is worn off. So, but I'm already, I mean, this sounds arrogant, so please don't take it that way. I'm just telling you the truth. But, you know, my 2019 schedule is almost gone and my 2020 schedule is starting to fill up. My first class in 2020 in January in Phoenix, Arizona is already half sold out.
Nice. Well deserved.
Thank you.
All right. So folks, check this out. We have in our show notes, remember, we only have YouTube only gives us a little bit of limited space on how much we can put in the details of the video. So check out our full show notes. Just do a search in your Google or whatever browser you use for Civilian Carry Radio, and that'll take you to our website, which is at firearmsradio.tv/civilian-carry-radio. That has our full show notes. That has a link to Dave's website, his Facebook page, his YouTube, which has some phenomenal training videos. Also, Dave's full bio is there, and make sure you get on book in his class because, again, you heard the knowledge this man dropped. This is the knowledge that you need, and if it comes to a shooting solution, you want to make sure that you win. To become a corporate sponsor or to advertise on the show, please send me an email to baraka3@gmail.com for details. Please share, subscribe, leave your feedback by commenting at the bottom of our YouTube video here. Also, please hit the alert bell icon when you subscribe so you know when we go live. And please give us a thumbs up so that'll help push the algorithm within YouTube to show the video more. We have all of the links to our social media in our show notes, our website. Please follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, like our Facebook page, and join our Facebook group. All of our audio podcasts are listed below, basically the major ones of iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podbean, Speaker Player, FM, or whichever one you want to use and listen to. Thank you to the people who pledge. Your support helps to contribute to the goal of educating the people on the importance of the Second Amendment, firearms, education, safety, training, and proper mindset. Also, folks, we have various discounts from our industry partners, Aridus Industries, ATI. I just sent my, I got a Glock 17 Gen 3 slide from Brownells on sale with forward serrations for $167, and I just sent my P1 Acro from Aimpoint to Douglas Holloway, and he's currently milling my slide. He asked that you still send your Acro if you're going to get the red dot slide, just like you do with your RMRs, to him, so he can mill it specific and as tight as he can for your specific optic. And that discount code for 10% off slide work is CC Radio or CCR ATI 10. We have discount codes for Battle Comp, Big Tex Outdoors, Dark Angel Medical, Fire Clean, Trident Concepts, Tough Products. Please join us next Wednesday, May 8th, for our 93rd episode, where we feature Mr. Tim Herron from USPSA Masterclass shooter and owner of Herring Shooting. We also booked a bunch of people when Alan and I this last week went to in our annual meeting in Indianapolis. We were there all day Saturday. We want to thank all the fans who came out, shook our hand, took pictures. I reposted those all on our Instagram and on our Facebook page. And we want to tell you it is a pleasure and honor. And we hope you guys enjoy those t-shirts. Those t-shirts will be for sale as soon as I get some more reprinted those will be available not on our website, but our Facebook page, our Facebook group, and through our Instagram. So please take a look out for that. We also rebooked while we were out there, Sergeant Major, help me out, Alan. Victor, Vikings Tactics is Gore Black here. Thank you. Kyle Lamb, again, he will be on our show again soon. So just take a look out there. Also, Alan and I just registered a couple hours ago via Lee for TacCon 2020, which will be at the Dallas Pistol Club in Carrollton, Texas, March 27th.
March 27th to 29th, 2020.
Thank you so much. We have that link also in our show notes. Alan, final thoughts, brother.
I'm thankful there were guys like you around that saw you needed information and decided to find it for yourselves, and then for whatever reason decided to try to teach it to us knuckleheads out here and help us if we ever need to defend ourselves or our families. I really like that you focus on pistol and you stay with that, and I kind of feel like going to you is like going to brain surgeon for brain surgery instead of your general practitioner. I really appreciate that, and then I want to kind of to echo Baraka. It's really humbling the what we get from the guys that come out at place NRAM and you guys that participate in the chat and Facebook page and all that stuff. We really appreciate all you guys, and it makes it that much better to do this, and getting to hang out and talk and learn from guys like this, and then to have you guys give us your feedback. It's great. I thank you guys.
All right, thank you, Alan. Lee, your final thoughts, brother?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the mingle before we got out of here tonight. Folks, make sure you just Google the mingle. Great training event that's coming up here.
Well, you better put firearms with it, because who knows?
The mingle firearms. Shelly will get on to me if I don't mention the mingle tonight. It's a great training event that's coming up to benefit several great causes. Dave, I got to tell you, the other night I had dinner with a young man who is 21 years old, and he's already been around to visit some of the best trainers that are out there going in the business. And he asked me, he said, so tell me, what about Dave Spaulding? Do I need to make sure I get one of those classes? And I'm like, yeah, and you better hurry up, and because it's hard to get into the classes because they sell out pretty quick. And I think I'll be sending him a message as soon as the show's over tonight. You need to download this podcast and make sure you listen to it. We hit on all the points I was hoping we'd hit tonight about the historical context of firearms. And thank you for, I've only known you for a year or so now, but you've been very open with me and been a great source of information. Just from my generation, they're the guys that are coming up to take this over. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having me on here. I really enjoyed myself. I really enjoyed the conversation and the company. I turned most of these requests down because many of the people that do these things are crazy.
You don't hold your tongue. I love that about you.
I mean, they are. You just don't understand where you're at. And when you guys, asked me to come on here, and especially when I found out that Daryl and Lee were going to be on here, I just thought this is going to be fun. We're going to exchange some good ideas. We're going to have a good conversation, and I like conversing. I just don't want to stand here and preach. I like the idea that we all talk back and forth and exchange ideas. So thank you very much for having me. I really had a good time.
Well, Dave, before you go, I'm going to give my final thought, and we always leave the honor to you, our guest, the last thought. And folks, I just want to tell you that, again, the internet's forever. These are historical archives that will be around for years and years after all of us pass on. That is our hope. That is our pleasure. That is our honor to have great guests like Dave, great co-hosts like Lee, great co-hosts like Daryl. That's our intention that Alan and I are here, is to provide knowledge for you folks to be able to protect yourselves from predators. That doesn't always mean a gun. Shooting is not always a solution. It's mindset. It's paying attention. It's being aware and opening your eyes and taking off the rose-colored glasses and understanding that there are wolves among us. You don't have to be scared, but you need to be aware, you need to be prepared so that you can look out for yourselves, the people you love and care about, your neighborhoods, your homes, because I'm sick and tired of seeing predators get the best of people, and that's why we do what we do. So we want to thank you guys, like Alan was saying, for your support, for coming into the chat, for giving us your time. We are honored and humbled to be doing this job and giving back. This is our way of giving back, and it's our pleasure to do this. And thank you so much, folks, for your continued support. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Alan. And DB, man, thank you for doing this right up till you had to go to work. That shows how much he cares. And I leave the last thought with you, Dave.
Thank you very much. I hope what we did tonight helps somebody. If we can save one life or just keep one person out of danger, then all of this is worth it.
Awesome.
Well said. Meanwhile, I'm choking him on my own spit over here. God bless you guys. Have a good night. Thank you.